Thank you for spending another midweek moment with the Wisconsin property taxpayers. I'm Paul Rozeski. Today is Thursday, February 26th, 2026. Thanks for being here. Before we jump into some headlines, let's take a quick look at the week ahead. First, something cool in Wisconsin, literally. This weekend in Madison is the Frozen Assets Festival on Lake Mendota. Winter games, ice activities, sled dog demonstrations, even a frozen boat regatta. Literally sounds like a fun place to chill. Looking at the calendar, Sunday is National Public Opinion Day, so maybe try to find out what everyone else is up to. However you decide to celebrate, please celebrate responsibly. And really, in full transparency, I picked that holiday 100% for the transition value because this week's theme is public sentiment. Among other things, we look at the Marquette Law School poll, where people are at and what they're listening to. So without further ado, let's jump into some news together. This week, let's actually start with new property tax rankings. The annual Wallet Hub breakdown dropped, and Wisconsin stays in its poor position with a ranking of 7th most oppressive property tax burden in the union. But as I always point out, we rank better than half the states in property tax climate, but high in property tax burden. Believe me, it could be worse. Thankfully, the personal property tax was eliminated, but here's something I learned, and it's a kicker. There are some states that have a crazy-sounding tax called the intangible property tax. Accountants, right now they're shrugging their shoulders because it's a term they've been used to forever, but seriously, I'm not sure if that sounds more like a contradiction or an oxymoron, property and intangible. I know plenty of people are rightly frustrated with what they feel are inconsistencies in assessments of real property. Imagine getting a property tax assessment on the intrinsic value of intangibles like a brand or a logo. I think my head would explode. Seriously, can't make this stuff up. In other news, this week, the latest Marquette Law School poll dropped, as I mentioned before. And the early governor's race numbers are mildly interesting. Here are the highlights. The Democrat race is still jam-packed as a scrum in a dead heat. What is a surprise is that Mandela Barnes came in with name ID of 61%, but is statistically tied in this race with someone that has less than half of the name recognition. What isn't a surprise is that 65% of all voters are undecided for everything. The governor's race, the Supreme Court, doesn't matter if they're Republicans or Democrats. Everyone seems to have a blank slate, but one number is actually starting to move. So, no one's really investing in campaign ads yet, except Chris Taylor, Democrat, running for Supreme Court. Some is positive, that's building her up, and some is attacking her opponent, Maria Lazar. They started with similar favorability rankings in October. 4 months later, Maria Lazar's favorability rating has gone down by 3 points, but possibly more importantly, Chris Taylor's has gone up by 7, which is a 10-point swing and probably includes some of the ever-important independent vote. Highlight number 2 is on a completely unrelated topic from the Marquette poll. It's that 60% of people surveyed said it is more important to reduce property taxes than it is to increase spending on public schools. That number has been 55% or higher for the past 2.5 years. 63% of voters in this poll also said they want half or more of the surplus to be returned to taxpayers as property tax reductions. So while the Senate wanted to get the money back to everybody in income tax refunds, say what you want about him, Robin Vos read the room and is trying to get the property tax rebate to happen. Highlight number 3. I thought this was interesting. 2 spots where the voters are evenly split. When given 2 options, half of voters chose that the legislature has failed to provide enough funding to schools, and half think the schools must live within their budget limits. Both of those answers sound very partisan. The second spot is about the governor's veto that turned 2 consecutive years of bigger possible property tax increases into 402 consecutive years of potentially bigger property tax increases. Half picked the option that his veto was necessary to support public schools in the long run, and half picked the option that his veto will mean tax increases each year for centuries. Again, both answers sound very partisan. Both of those questions had answers with a slant to them, which had the unintended effect of getting people to just slant towards their tribe, and all they did was reinforce that Wisconsin is a purple state and didn't actually inform us about anything. One of the rare times I think the Marquette Law School poll made kind of a basic mistake and needs to do better. In other news, and staying on the topic of school funding, we pivot to Eau Claire, where the teachers union, along with some of the state's largest school districts, and for optics, parents too, have sued the legislature, arguing that the state's funding formula for schools is unconstitutional because it doesn't meet the obligation to provide educational opportunities to all students as required by the state constitution. There's a ton to unpack with education funding, way more than I can do in multiple podcasts, let alone one segment. But my favorite part of all this comes from some of the quotes that revolve around announcing this lawsuit. Both of the quotes are completely worthy of the "you can't make this stuff up" file. Now, tip of the hat here to Baylor Spears, reporter from the Wisconsin Examiner, who found this text from the pages of the lawsuit. Remember, we're talking about education here, and I quote, "The fault for this crisis lies not at the feet of students, parents, families, teachers, staff, administrators, school districts, or elected board members," unquote. So, am I hearing you correctly that everyone directly involved in education has no fault in the failings of education or what you're calling an education crisis? Okay, honestly, you put that in writing in the lawsuit. I am honestly kind of speechless. Quote number 2 from the lead lawyer. "These folks are not magicians. They are not Rumpelstiltskin. They cannot turn straw into gold, and we do not have what we need for our schools to thrive," unquote. Now, I'm going to replace "these folks" and see how this sounds. "Parents, families, teachers, staff, administrators, school districts, and elected board members cannot turn straw into gold." Wow, tell us what you really think about our kids. Dang. Now, yes, that's funny, but I'm kidding. I'm sure what he's really talking about is the funding and not about our kids. So I don't want to take it out of context. But what this guy needs to remember is that the state and property taxpayers aren't Rumpelstiltskin either, and can't just turn straw into gold and come up with whatever money they feel like they're entitled to. What this is really about is attacking a funding system where education money follows the student, and the rise in the option of school choice programs has allowed for competition in the education monopoly's marketplace. Clearly, Rick Essenberg, the president of the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, had the same thought as me, because he released a statement that was also very direct and very to the point. And I quote, "The plaintiffs ignore basic facts about public education in Wisconsin and blame Wisconsin's parental choice programs and charter schools for their own failures. School choice has survived legal challenges before and will do it again. The plaintiffs would do better to solve their own problems rather than seek scapegoats and work around our Constitution and democratic republic, unquote. As the kids would say, oh snap! Dang, this, my friends, is what a lawyer rap battle looks like, and it is definitely far from over. And finally, in the spirit of polling numbers, I dedicate this quote from Abraham Lincoln to the following. Mandela Barnes campaign for governor, lawmakers that want to increase property taxes, and, heck, we'll throw in lawmakers that are against voter ID. And I quote, public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Unquote. Have a great second half of your week, and as always, thanks for listening. The Wisconsin Property Taxpayers Inc. is a nonpartisan membership organization consisting of thousands of small business, farm, and homeowner members in every bundled up corner of the state. Founded in 1985, the organization is committed to providing its members with up-to-date information, legislative advocacy, and exclusive cost-saving benefits. Find out how to join at WPTOnline.org/join.